and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
I'm Ann Northrup, and one thing we want to tell you is that you can now see this program on your various devices, because in addition to the audio podcast that we put up, we're putting up a video podcast.
And in the news, you're probably wondering, or maybe wondering, what we thought about the Supreme Court cases this week. Because the court did hear oral arguments in the two big same-sex marriage cases, weighing the constitutionality of Prop 8, banning same-sex marriage in California, and Section 3 of the Defense of Marriage Act that denies federal recognition to same-sex marriages that are legal in the states. And the court also heard arguments in both days about whether the parties had standing to argue the cases.
We'll tell you where you can read and hear the actual arguments, but meanwhile, we will tell you what we think of all of that. Rallies were held in Washington and in all 50 states leading up to these arguments by supporters of same-sex marriage. Opponents also showed up in Washington.
The American Academy of Pediatrics came out for same-sex marriage, citing the benefit to children.
Everybody's getting into the act. A bunch more U.S. senators, every minute they're coming out for same-sex marriage.
Civil unions have been legalized in Colorado.
Gay and lesbian couples filed lawsuits this week in Nevada and Utah in New Mexico and Utah asking for same-sex marriage.
In Alabama, LGBT high school students are demanding the repeal of a state law that mandates that students be taught that homosexual activity is criminal.
They're adorable. Lieutenant Dan Choi is back in court this week in the District of Columbia after several years to face charges when he handcuffed himself to the fence at the White House.
And he wants to re-enlist in this service.
And if he's convicted, he's not going to be allowed to.
Right. The new Archbishop...
Yeah, go ahead.
The new Archbishop of Canterbury, who's the leader of the Anglican Communion, has agreed to meet with gay activist Peter Tatchell, who openly challenged his homophobia. And it's emerged that the new Pope has met several times with a gay activist while Archbishop of Buenos Aires.
300,000 people showed up in Paris, bussed in from the suburbs and the hinterlands.
All right.
We
believe in busing.
To demonstrate quite vociferously against same-sex marriage.
In Warsaw, Poland, a public sculpture looking like a rainbow has caused quite a bit of controversy and arson.
And there's some controversy, not arson yet, at Boston College, which is a private Catholic university. The administrators there have ordered students to stop handing out condoms.
I'll give you my take on the new version of Breakfast at Tiffany's on Broadway. And if you can't wait up...
It's bad. And I'll give you my review of Jenna Wolfe going on the Today Show and announcing that she and her girlfriend are pregnant.
Wow.
Well, she is, and she has a girlfriend who's another NBC correspondent. All very fascinating.
Let's go to court.
Okay. Well, first of all, it was a nice, lively atmosphere with several thousand people out front on both sides.
A carnival atmosphere.
At first, I was afraid the Westboro Baptist Church had not shown up, but then a friend who was there started sending me pictures of them this week, so they were there too. But it was, and we attended a rally here in New York on Sunday before the cases were argued on Tuesday.
They even said the Pledge of Allegiance there. It was a little much.
And someone sang the Star Spangled Banner.
Yeah, I know. Look, It's not like but we've had a little trouble with our country and the way it treats us. And then maybe I'm willing to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
And then they did this whole thing
And they
online,
give me my equal rights.
where they took the HRC equals symbol, the yellow bars on the blue background.
It's red now.
Well, that's why I wore my red sweater today.
It's the color, they say, of love.
But then companies took it, like Bud Light put up 2 Bud Light cans.
2 sticks of butter. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on and on. It's become
sure
a
you've
meme.
seen it. The point being that this was so huge in the news, and it's not like we didn't think it would be, but it really has been overwhelming.
And not to go to skip over, but I mean the court, which we will of course get to, but all these senators did come out for same-sex marriage in the run-up to this. People you wouldn't entirely expect. Claire McCaskill.
Well, let's save that.
You have to wait to find out who else did it.
It is an avalanche. It is. We started as a little snowball rolling down the hill, and now it is an avalanche.
Well, I mean, on the other hand, I read articles saying it's all now inevitable. It's got to happen. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. We've won. All this kind of stuff. The liberation is over, and we will, I think, eventually get marriage rights in the United States. But there's a lot of work to be done, and there's an infinite amount of work to be done around the world. So let's not rest on our laurels.
Well, no one is resting on their laurels. The momentum is picking up and people are fighting harder and harder. And if we lose these cases, it's only going to provoke more action and more activity.
And keep a lot of people employed on both sides.
Or active, at least. All right, well, let's get to the actual cases.
Sure.
And we'll take them in order. And the first case argued on Tuesday of this week was the Prop 8 case from California. This one is complicated.
It's called the Perry case.
And there are 2 sections of each case on each day. One is about who's entitled to be in court and bring these arguments. That's the standing argument. Who has standing to bring these cases to court? And the other half is the actual discussion of the case. Who's right, who's wrong on the issues in the case.
And it turns out that the cases were argued by 2 guys who were best friends. Ted Olson, who was a famous conservative who argued our side, and Charles Cooper, who argued the supporting Proposition 8. And when Charles Cooper opened up his mouth, the first thing out of his mouth was to cite the New York precedent. New York, where the courts overturned an order to Mayor Bloomberg to start same-sex marriages in 2005. But before he could even explain what he was talking about, he got asked about these standing questions.
Yes. Yes, Chief Justice Roberts interrupted every lawyer who spoke on Tuesday to say, wait, before you get to the case, let's talk about standing.
Right. And right away, Justice Ginsburg, who is one of the liberals, said, this court has never granted standing to the bringers of a ballot initiative before. So this would be unprecedented if the people supporting and the reason the supporters of Prop 8 have had to, or have been allowed so far by California courts, or federal courts, to do this is because the state of California won't defend it. And something came up here. Actually, I'm no fan of Alito, but one of the things he said in this was, the reason we have initiatives is because the government is not doing what the people want. And if you're saying that the government officials, you can pass an initiative and the government officials can just say, no, we don't want to enforce that, that is problematic.
It is. And so they went back and forth on this with no real indication of where they're going to end up. It is entirely possible that they will decide that the proponents of Prop 8 don't have standing and they will kick this case out. What became clear throughout this was the real discomfort on all sides about this. But I found that very disingenuous.
Well, the discomfort for Kennedy was especially in the Prop 8 case.
Yes.
And it was more about, even more than standing. It was about, for him, what he was saying, are we going too fast? Are we going too soon? All this kind of stuff. They're a bunch of cowards and they don't want to stick their necks out.
Maureen Dowd had the best column on that in the New York Times on
cowards.
Wednesday. You should look at that column if you want a summation of that point of view, because that really was what it came down to. These justices rather, and then I'm talking about the right-wingers, I'm talking about Roberts and Alito and
Clarence Thomas.
no, he didn't say a word.
Oh, of course.
But the other right-wing, Scalia.
Oh, well, how could we forget him?
Yes.
Most vile member of the court.
Exactly. But what they kept saying was, you know, Alito's saying, how can we be asked to decide on something that's more recent than cell phones and the internet? And how can we decide on something when we don't know what's going to happen down the road? And this is an experiment, and we don't know how this is going to turn out. And I wanted to say, how dare you? How dare you make arguments like this? First of all, look at how heterosexual marriage has turned out. Certainly there are pluses and minuses there. And since when do you look at a case and not look at the constitutionality of the law, but at what you think its unintended consequences are going to be?
The old adage is the Supreme Court follows the election returns, and that's the only reason they're a little nervous about this, is because things are moving in our direction. Otherwise, they would just
I think the
get rid of
most
it.
successful PR job that has suddenly swept over them in the last 2 weeks is this whole line about they decided Roe v. Wade too fast and too hugely.
Justice Ginsburg said that, a big feminist.
Exactly, and it produced a backlash.
Well,
similarly with Brown versus Board of Education.
It is true that some of these sweeping decisions had, obviously, what we would call very good decisions, excellent decisions, had some negative consequences. As soon as they issued the abortion ruling, a lot of the women's movement fighting for abortion rights in the states, people stopped doing it. I mean, they said, we've got the right from the court. And look what's happening now in 2013, where every state is falling all over itself to ban abortion in worse and worse ways. Horrible. And if our side stopped engaging in trying to change minds and hearts. That is a problem, depending on just the courts. Similarly, in Brown v. Board of Education. I mean, again, I think it's a terrific decision. A 9-0 decision, for that matter. But I know African-American kids who said, you threw me in with these racist white kids. And in the South, they set up all these Christian academies and starved the public schools. So there are consequences for these decisions when you don't work to bring people along and you just depend upon the courts.
And through all this and these kinds of concerns, because the merits constitutionally of Prop 8 were barely touched upon, it really was predominantly about this, what are the consequences of this conversation.
Well, go ahead.
Go
ahead.
I'm
saying it's also because Kennedy was not just interested in standing, he was also saying, well, why are we taking this case?
Well, that's what I was getting to.
And that's different from a standing question.
Yes.
And that may prevail.
Which would be great. What he said was, perhaps this case was improvidently granted.
Exactly.
And what they have is an option to say, they have several options, of course, in these cases, but one that we had not foreseen. We had thought maybe they'll throw it out because of standing issues, and then it'll get kicked all the way back down to the original federal court, the district court, Vaughn Walker's decision, which would mean it would...
Two couples can get married.
And then the state of California could extrapolate from that.
Yes, that's probably what would happen.
Yes, declare marriage rights. But it would be a sort of fiat.
And Art Leonard, the gay law professor and blogger, says that if that happens, 1 or 2 new same-sex marriages could well arrive on the doorstep in a fairly short order. After that, they would have bought themselves a little time and more cases would come to them.
And here's how that would happen. Not from throwing out standing, but from this central thing of Kennedy saying, if they, what they call dig the case, dismiss as improvidently granted, D-I-G.
No national precedent would be set, but California almost entirely sure those couples would be able to get married.
More. Here's what happens.
Maybe Nevada and Hawaii.
If you dig the case, if you dismiss as improvidently granted, then the Ninth Circuit ruling is what rules. That's the last ruling. And that could cover the whole Ninth Circuit.
Well, if they are a state where they argued the same kinds of things as Nevada and Hawaii did, not every state.
Well, the district courts in Hawaii and Nevada decided against us.
They're on review, though.
So, yes, they are on review, but that could then make it come back to the Supreme Court in a more comprehensive way and a couple of years down the road, which would give more chance for this to develop. Now, one thing that the right wing, Charles Cooper, kept arguing about was this responsible procreation thing. When they did get to the merits of the case, I guess it was Kagan or maybe Sotomayor who said to him, you know, is there any other instance in which you could set up a separate system for same-sex couples or discrimination based on sexual orientation? And he said, no, I can't think of any other reason, any other case, employment, housing, public accommodations.
Here's the right wing conceding
Yes.
gay rights should be universal except for marriage.
Except for marriage. So then they say, okay, well, why marriage? Why is that different? And he says, the whole point of marriage is to promote responsible procreation.
And he says that gay and straight couples are not similarly situated.
But here's the thing, because they got into this whole argument that was considered very funny about, you know, can you bar heterosexual couples who can't procreate from marrying and blah, 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 and everybody's laughing about this and Strom Thurmond. But they missed what he actually said, which was not that the couple itself, the married couple, had to be able to procreate. He says that marriage exists to prevent men from going out and producing children with other women.
That's a new one.
That is a new one, and the court did not hear him say that.
They can read the transcripts as we did. He also said that this would refocus marriage on the needs of adults rather than children.
Shocking that that's a terrible thing.
And Kennedy, actually in raising a substantive argument, said, that the voice of children is important in this case. He started having feelings for the 40,000 kids in California who were being raised by gay people.
I love that they come up with these statistics because they come out of the Williams Institute, which is our think tank, which was originally the Institute for Gay and Lesbian Strategic Studies, which I am so proud to have been associated with, which has turned into the Williams Institute, which now does real fundamental research, because we decided 15 or so years ago that the right wing had all these think tanks that were phony baloney, the American Enterprise Institute, the Heritage Foundation.
And so now we have a few.
Well, we said, look, we have been running this movement on anecdote, and we need some real facts to be able to run these court cases or legislation or whatever. And so we created this think tank. It has done a brilliant job of putting together this information so that our lawyers can go into court and say, we do know there are 40,000 kids in California being raised by same-sex parents, couples, and we do know there are 138,000 same-sex couples who are married now in the United States who are being deprived of federal benefits, and we do need that kind of information. Fill out your census forms,
please.
Honestly.
So
that's where we get this.
Now, shall we talk about when Ted Olson stands up? He also he opposes standing for the other side.
I thought they, yes.
And that's when Kennedy raised this whole thing about state officers thwarting the initiative process by defending laws they don't like. Then Roberts goes into this argument where he says, I don't think when marriage was being dreamed up, anyone said, let's exclude homosexuals.
I wanted to punch out my computer because no one was standing up and saying, has anyone here read John Boswell? Do you know?
Or the Bible. Ruth and Naomi, David and Jonathan. There
were ceremonies of union between same-sex couples discovered from the 8th century.
But the prize has to go to Antonin Scalia, who then asks, when did it become unconstitutional to exclude, and he uses the term homosexuals? 1791, 1868, sometime after Baker v. Nelson, which was the original marriage case.
Yeah. I love Ginsburg dismissing Baker v. Nelson as an issue.
Yes.
She just batted it
there's
away.
An awful lot of stuff under the. She said there was no even gender-based discrimination that was illegal then, basically.
Yeah. The other thing that was interesting was this whole discussion of the 9-state solution, because we thought this sounded like a good idea at first, that you could
Apply it to the states where they already have all the rights, but they don't have the word.
Exactly.
And that was raised by Roberts.
Right.
He says this is just about the label. And Olson said the label marriage means something.
And part of our argument has been that they should take states where, because this applies directly to California, and it is why the California court, the Ninth Circuit, ruled that Prop 8 was inappropriate, because the state Supreme Court in California had already given marriage to same-sex couples on the basis that you couldn't discriminate against us if you had already given the rights.
And one of the things Olson kept bringing up is about California is all the arguments they're making on the other side about procreation, about all these other things, they don't apply to California, because California's already decided that they're entitled to kids, they're entitled to all their rights, so you can't bring up these arguments. But then Breyer raised an interesting, Breyer, supposedly one of the liberal justices, says, well, then a state, if you give it to the 9 other states, you're saying a state that's even considering civil unions might withhold all those benefits because they know they'd be forced to do marriage. And that may put gay people in a worse position.
Exactly. And that you are, in essence, punishing states that are coming along step by step, while giving states that are doing nothing for us a free pass and not forcing them to acknowledge same-sex marriage.
But what did the Solicitor General mean when he said that the proponents of Prop 8 want highly deferential Lee optical rational basis review, as though Prop 8 were on a par with the law of treating opticians less favorably than optometrists? It got very complicated when they start citing these cases, but that's what we had to wade through to try to understand this.
Well, what's really complicated is that it appears there is not a majority for any particular point of view.
Anything.
Kennedy, you know, the right-wingers were pretty much right-wing. The left-wingers were
medium.
Medium.
How about Sotomayor saying, well, we let racial discrimination percolate for 50 years, so why are we rushing this one?
And Kennedy kept changing his mind every 5 minutes. On the one hand, he's for the 40,000 kids. On the other hand, he's saying we shouldn't take this case in the first
does it all out loud.
So, which I love. I love listening to the audio of these arguments. It was just fantastic.
Which you can do, too, by going to supremecourt.gov.
Yes, you can read the transcripts,
or
you can listen
to
the arguments, or both simultaneously.
Put them on your...
But the great thing is that this could end up with Kennedy's thought prevailing, which is we are not ready to declare same-sex marriage legalization mandatory for all 50 states, but neither are we ready to uphold Prop 8 and destroy the decisions in the California federal courts. So let's just...
punt.
Exactly. Now,
That's bad.
Theoretically, I could certainly say, how dare you not read a constitutional right, an equal protection right for same-sex marriage? But if they're this confused at this point, and frankly, I was offended by the discussion. But given where they are, I think punting would be a great victory.
Well, there's an author named David Sirota on Salon who says they're treating these bad laws as if they're too big to fail, that the justices and most of the, that they're concerned with all these external factors. And it's the same way they treat the banks. Oh, we can't let them fail. Even though they're evil, we can't indict anybody. We can't do anything. And that's the problem with the court these days.
It was also as if they had no knowledge of the trial conducted by Vaughn Walker in the district court.
It sounds like they didn't read it.
It sounds like they read nothing. It made me want them to be forced to conduct their own trial if they're not going to read the transcript of the trial that Vaughn Walker insisted on to get all this information out there. If you go through that trial, you understand why this is necessary.
And,
now.
in the New York Times and most of us were arguing for a 50-state solution. We want our constitutional right to get married everywhere. But this court, just leaving the Prop 8 case, does not seem ready to do that.
And there was very little discussion of the level of scrutiny that needed to be applied to this. They weren't even at that point at all. Now, the other thing is, of course, that everybody is right when they say, and Ted Olson said coming out of there, we have no idea what these people are going to do.
Maybe they don't.
They may not, but because they raise certain questions in the oral arguments does not mean
Right.
that that's the major question on their mind when they go back to discuss the case.
We don't know. So moving to the DOMA case.
Wait, I just want to give a little shout out to the person who was the most eloquent on these issues, standing outside the court at the microphones and on Face the Nation last Sunday. And that was our hero, Brendan Ayanbadejo.
Oh, yes, I heard him on Face the Nation.
Oh, man, is he good.
He's very centered, he's very calm. You hit him with a lot of stuff and he handles it. He's terrific.
He couldn't be better. It is such a pleasure to listen to him because he really gets it and is totally committed, and I'd elect him to anything.
Okay.
I hope he runs for office.
All right.
So, yes, bottom line, Prop 8 case, totally confused, no idea what's going to happen.
Likely that people will be able to marry in California again, but we don't know.
And we would be thrilled with a decision that said, we're not going to deal with this.
Well, even more thrilled if they said, if Kennedy woke up and said, I've gone this far. I'm going to,
I really can't let those 40,000 kids hang out there without their parents married.
I will take some credit for this because when this issue came up, I started calling every politician I knew, trying to put them on the spot. They had never answered the question before. And one of them was Alan Hevesy, who was the comptroller of the city. And he said, why are we just saying we're for civil unions? If we're for this, let's be for marriage. And he might wake up and say the same thing.
He might.
And they all might get together and say, what the hell? They could sit in the room with each other and say, what the hell are we doing? Why are we holding back the tide of history here?
Right. Yes, they may.
So
we repeat, we have no idea what's going to happen.
In the meantime, keep working on these issues.
Yes.
Because they're not over.
Well, that's the other thing. If they do punt on Prop 8, it is going to just energize people more to go out and repeal Prop 8 in California.
Which I think would be a simple matter.
Yeah, the legislature can put it on the ballot. They don't even have to collect signatures. They just need 2/3 of the legislature.
Can
it
they
be
do
on
it
the
this
ballot
November?
next year, 2014.
Okay.
And everyone predicts, easy win. Of course, that's what they predicted last time. But it would energize people, I think, state by state to continue to press ahead on this, and that would be great.
Just don't bring it up in Russia. All right.
DOMA.
Well, again,
Day 2.
More. This is Wednesday, and there's more hand wringing on standing.
Oh my God. Much more.
But
twice as much.
I mean, it's endless. If you do read the transcript, you have to wade through half the transcript to get to any merits.
Well, now this subject is the Defense of Marriage Act, Section 3, which forbids the federal government to give any federal benefits or recognition to same-sex couples who are legally married.
And this is Edie Windsor's case. And
Yes.
talk about being eloquent. She was terrific coming out of the court. She's 83 years old. She's the one who, when her partner Thea Spire died, had to pay an extra $363,000 in taxes, which Elena Kagan calls a lot of money. But it is when you're a
I would call it a lot of money, too.
Well, it is when you're a Supreme Court justice.
Is it more than they're paid?
I imagine it is.
I think. Anyway, so we go back into court, but now the first day's arguments were supposed to last an hour. They gave them extra time, ended up 90 minutes. Second day, they assigned the first hour to arguments about standing and the second hour to arguments about the merits.
Let's explain what this is. This is, in this case, originally the United States, because this case is Edie Windsor versus the United States. And in this case, the United States was originally against Edie Windsor and fighting against her. The Obama administration was fighting against her. And then, in the appeal, the Obama administration switches sides, where they say, no, we agree with her. We agree that the law is unconstitutional, and they start fighting the law in court. So
it wasn't that many years ago that the Obama administration was going into court and saying you should uphold the Defense of Marriage Act because of responsible procreation.
Right, but there is a wrinkle here.
Yes.
And the wrinkle is that even though the administration thinks it's unconstitutional, they also think that it should be enforced until the court tells them not to do it. And that's where all this gets balled up.
They could have decided once the federal court at a lower jurisdiction said to the federal government, you lose, she wins.
Give her her money.
Yes, they could have said, okay, and given her the money. But they decided in their infinite wisdom to keep at this. Now, whether their subtext agenda was to get a national ruling on the Defense of Marriage Act, which looks likely, who knows? But what they said was, we hear you, we don't disagree with you, but we're not paying her back the money until we have a higher court sort this out.
These are very serious standing issues because, I mean, the justices were saying, Roberts was saying, this is totally unprecedented. Scalia is saying this has never happened before. What's going to happen in the future if we allow this case to go forward and we make a decision on the merits? So there's that.
Well, the federal government's line is that what creates conflict here, because you have to have conflict to get to the Supreme Court, the conflict is that we haven't paid the money yet, and we're not going to pay it until you tell us to. And the court is saying, well, you know, you're not allowed to just run around and make decisions like that. You were ordered to pay the money, and you can pay the money without having to bring it to us. And the side part of this...
But would that end DOMA?
No. Only in the Second Circuit, because that's what was covered by the lower court.
Right. But when they finally did get to the merits of the thing, there seemed to be a lot of sympathy for getting rid of DOMA.
Let's first get the other arm
I
of
just
standing
don't want them to get too upset while we go through all this.
The other part of the standing argument is that you may remember that John Boehner of the House of Representatives has authorized $3 million to be spent to have his lawyers defend the Defense of Marriage Act in
with
court.
Your money.
And the question is whether he has the right to be there in court. And everyone who was at the court today, looking at these, we're taping on the day the DOMA arguments happen, seems to think we win on the merits in a walk. We'll get to that in a second. But there are some real issues here with standing, and we haven't necessarily won that, and that could be a bad thing if this is thrown out on standing issues.
Again, you could bring up another case in a year or two, so it would take longer for people to get their benefits.
Well, you'd have to create...
Edie is 83.
You'd have to create a bigger
And she had a heart attack after her partner died.
Which, as she said, was very common. Anyway, so the standing issues are real and difficult, and we're less sanguine about them in this case because we think we can win this case, and we want to win it, and we think it's an easier decision and one that will not create a huge backlash. Because this is just saying the federal government has to recognize the validity of legal same-sex marriages. Who could be against that?
Right.
So that's where they went, that discussion of the merits after the discussion of standing.
Right.
And
Justice Kennedy, again, the key vote here, here's his quote from the arguments. The question is whether or not the federal government, under a federalism system, which we have, has the authority to regulate marriage.
Now, ironically, federalism means the states have rights. I've never understood that construct linguistically.
Well, let's explain.
Yes.
I mean, people should know. It varies from state to state who you can marry already.
Yes.
In some states, you can marry your first cousins. In some cases, you can't. Ages differ across the country. Closeness of relatives, that's mostly what it is.
And now, in some states, people can marry their partners of the same sex, and in other states, they can't. So the question is, does the federal government have any right to step in and overrule a state that has made its own rules about marriage? And historically, it has not.
Now,
the federal government has been happy to accept every state's definition of who is legally married.
I think the other side can cite something from 1880 around polygamy, but okay, in terms of the federal government getting involved. But I have a concern here.
Yes.
Because the arguments are all states' rights. Now,
not all. Some of them are equal protection.
No. I'm saying the main one that seems to be prevailing here is states' rights. And here's the thing: we have often, as progressives, because the states are so recalcitrant on so many things, we want these federal laws that tell the states you got to do it this way under the Commerce Clause or something because there's interstate commerce around it or whatever, and we impose this on the states. Scalia, all these other guys, they don't like this stuff. They want a federal system where the states have more rights. And if we win on this basis, we are establishing a precedent of overturning what the Congress wants to do to the states, in this case a bad thing, saying we're not going to recognize same-sex marriages, You don't have to recognize same-sex marriages if you don't want to. We're losing a power, I think, to some extent, if we win on that basis.
I'm less concerned about that. And I think the liberal judges are quite set on this as an equal protection question. You know, the Clement, the Blagg lawyer, the bipartisan legal...
the Boehner lawyer.
Yes. He goes in and he makes the same argument he's always made, which is that Congress passed this law to establish uniformity in marriage definitions, and the
Kennedy
liberal,
said Kennedy said it's just not really uniformity at all. It's the opposite.
It's a very strange definition of uniformity when you are making a distinction between these legally married couples and these legally married couples.
Or, as Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, there are now two kinds of marriage: full marriage and the skim milk marriage. That would be us. We like skim milk.
I kind of like 1%.
I like whole milk.
I like them all, but I try to
Whole milk lasts
restrict
longer.
myself.
And
Yeah.
it makes you fatter, but
The
it lasts longer.
The fat preserves it
Right.
longer.
And heavy cream will last you till the end of the year.
At any rate, we think winning on the merits on the DOMA case, easy, whether you like the grounds of it or not.
Okay.
Winning on standing on the DOMA case, not so easy.
And if you don't win on standing, you don't have a case.
You're out.
So we don't know where they're going to go on this.
Is this enough? Well, I just want to repeat that if you would like to make your own decisions on this, you can go to supremecourt.gov, read the transcripts, listen to the audio. It's fascinating to listen to the audio.
Be prepared for Justice Scalia's bigotry, although Edie Windsor the next day said she thought the justices were gentle, direct, and she didn't feel any hostility, and she thinks it's going to be good.
The other thing is, if you would like someone else's analysis of this, a good place to go to read discussions of all this is the website that was created by the former Courage campaign people in California. It's called equalityontrial.com. And there are some smart people writing on that site, and they can give you some good insight.
I've
Also,
read some.
Art Leonard in Gay City News.
Absolutely, Art Leonard.
Yeah.
But a couple of footnotes. The Chief Justice's lesbian cousin was on hand the first day, at least.
I doubt she'll have any effect.
There's some speculation that Republicans could benefit if we win, because the issue would be off the table and they wouldn't have to, be stuck with this.
They wouldn't have to take responsibility for having an opinion on it because it would be done.
Karl Rove says a 2016 presidential candidate in his party, the Republicans, could support this and be in there. I don't agree with that.
Well, the Victory Fund website, the Gay Politics Report, that puts out a column twice a week and has these little surveys, asked recently, when do you think the Republican Party will nominate a candidate who supports marriage rights? 2016, 2020, 2020, never. I said 2016. I think.
Well, Huntsman now supports it, and he ran the last time. But you mean the nominee?
The nominee. Not the fringe people. I think the nominee in 2016 could very well be supportive of
here's
marriage
something
rights.
that supports Ann's argument, and this is Democrats, but these are Democrats we did not expect to be for same-sex marriage who are now for it. Claire McCaskill of Missouri, Mark Begich of Nevada.
Of Alaska.
I'm sorry. What did I say? Alaska. Mark Warner of Virginia and John Tester of Montana.
And Kay Hagan of North Carolina and Jay Rockefeller of West Virginia.
Wow.
All this week announced their support for same-sex marriage.
Well, why wouldn't they? 53% of Americans now think it should be legal in the CBS poll. It was 58% in another poll. Six in 10 think the federal government should give benefits under like DOMA.
And Nate Silver of the New York Times did an analysis of all the polls, and he said when you average them all out, it's 51% national support. But he says it's going up predictably several points a year, and it's going to be overwhelming support in just a few years.
Well, you always bump up against, there's a certain plateau. There's the Flat Earth Society.
Well.
30%, anyway.
And, last week's big news was Republican Ohio Senator Rob Portman coming out. Well, this week his gay son, Will Portman, wrote a really lovely piece in the Yale Daily News, where he is now a junior, about his process of coming out. Very moving, I thought.
Also in the CBS poll, 53% now think we can't change for being gay. This is new.
Now, there is
and
one...
51% say the Boy Scouts should integrate.
There is one little setback in Ohio, of which Portman is the Republican senator. The governor of Ohio, John Kasich, tried to get with the program and announced he thought civil unions were a great idea.
Should never speak off the cuff.
The right wing pounced. He then had to announce that he was against marriage and he was against changing the state constitution to allow for civil unions. And so even with Portman coming out from Ohio, the governor got shot down.
Well,
DuPont, makers of napalm, supports marriage equality in Delaware, where it's going to be introduced any minute. Rhode Island held a Senate committee hearing on same-sex marriage. It's already passed the House there, and we're waiting for the Senate to take it up. That hearing lasted until 5 o'clock in the morning.
God, people love to hear themselves talk. We only do it for an hour here each week, 58 minutes. And we bury the headline, which is that we actually have a new right in Colorado because Governor John Hickenlooper has signed the Colorado Civil Unions Bill. They can't do marriage there because they have a constitutional amendment against it, but they've done what they can.
In front of a huge crowd in the state capitol cheering. It was quite moving.
And,
great video of
as
that.
we said, other cases have to move forward because we don't know what's going to happen with these. So 3 couples are challenging the Utah ban, constitutional ban, passed in 2004. They were quick on the money in Utah. As soon as they heard about the idea of same-sex marriage from the Hawaii case.
But 2004 was the Bush election year when they passed them all over the country.
Sorry. Well, wait a minute. What did I say? They passed a law against it in 1995. That's what I meant. I'm sorry.
And in New Mexico, 2 lesbian couples filed for marriage licenses, were rejected, and have filed suit for marriage there with the ACLU and the NCLR.
And Leon County in Florida, which includes Tallahassee, passed a domestic partner registry on March the 12th.
And in Nevada, a Senate committee has begun hearings on a bill that has been proposed to repeal the state constitutional amendment against marriage.
And
go ahead.
Did you do Howard Schultz?
No.
No, Howard Schultz had Starbucks, and somebody confronted him at the shareholders meeting and said, hey, you know, it's costing us business by you supporting same-sex marriage. And he said, if you feel you can get a higher return than the 38% you got last year from me, it's a free country, sell your shares and buy it in another company. And to loud applause from the audience.
Exactly.
From shareholders. You think all they care about is money?
And just so we remember who we're talking about here and the issues that are raised, we want to show you a local news report about a lesbian who is retiring from the Navy.
Melissa Smith.
She is married. She and her wife have 6 kids. Melissa wanted her wife to show up at the retirement ceremony and be recognized, as other spouses are in such cases.
Denied.
Not only are they not recognizing the spouse, they're not recognizing 4 of the 6 kids.
Don't you know there's a Defense of Marriage Act?
Roll tape.
Come here.
TJ Jenkins has made the same sacrifices as any other Navy wife, but because she's gay, she won't be recognized at her sailor's retirement ceremony next month.
To be a second-class citizen is just like me sitting at the back of the bus.
Jenkins married SH1 Melissa Smith in Maryland 2 months ago.
It felt more real and concrete because we were married.
All TJ wants is this, a letter of recognition for the way she's supported her sailor.
It's priceless, you know, because it's coming from a wife.
The commanding officer's signature is needed for the letter to be presented at Smith's retirement ceremony, and it seems the CO does not approve.
It was like a slap in the face. It's gotten to the point to where sometimes, you know, we'll have discussions and she just don't want to have retirement.
In a letter, Rear Admiral T.J. Alexander writes Smith, the federal government does not recognize same-gender domestic partners as spouses.
It's okay for her to fight for her country. It's okay for her, you know, to to do all these things for her country and to make all these sacrifices. But when it comes to her personal relationships, you know, it's a big issue.
Yet other same-sex partners of sailors have been given the same letter Jenkins and Smith are fighting for. This one as recently as 6 weeks ago.
To me, I feel as if they're putting pressure on her until she just blankly gives up.
They have 6 children together. 4 of them are Jenkins's, 2 are Smith's. The sailor says she's been told only her biological children will be recognized at a retirement ceremony, and that is something her wife cannot live with.
We're going to the ceremony and they're just going to give the certificates to 2 of the children and not the other 4. You know, and how would that make them feel, because they're all sister and brothers.
Military concerns came up in the DOMA arguments at the Supreme Court, and there's some thinking that the unequal treatment of military families could have a large impact on the decision.
Right.
And I wish this would have a large impact. The American Academy of Pediatrics, huge national, big, respected group, put out a report and policy statement called Promoting the Well-Being of Children Whose Parents Are Gay or Lesbian. They reaffirm their support for same-sex marriage, adoption, foster care rights, and noted that there are 3 million same-sex parents, gay and lesbian parents, with 6 million kids in this country.
Right. All right, some other news. Besides marriage news?
Yes.
The Kentucky legislature overrode the governor's veto of that anti-gay bill that they passed there.
The Religious Freedom Act.
It's allowing anybody with sincerely held religious beliefs to do whatever the hell they want, which is very dangerous, he said.
If you want to discriminate because you believe in God, then you can do so in Kentucky.
Oh, God.
And in Arizona, we have told you that a right-wing representative had proposed a bill where if you are transsexual or transgender, you have to show ID before going to the bathroom. That got jumped on. He withdrew that. Now he's got an alternate bill which says if you discriminate against people who are transsexual
You
or
can't be
transgender,
sued.
You're okay. Just like Kentucky.
Glisten did a report on LGBT youth in New York City and found that 8 out of 10 have been verbally abused because of their sexual orientation. I'd like to meet the other 2%, 2 students. 1 in 5 have been physically assaulted. 1 in 10 assailed with a weapon because of their sexuality in the city of New York, where, you know, we're supposed to have an anti-bullying law.
Well, in Alabama, they have a law that says you cannot promote homosexuality in the schools. You must teach that it is sinful, disgusting, and perverted.
Criminal.
And some
And
teenagers there, criminal too, because of course they still think sodomy laws apply.
Right.
So some teenagers there in Alabama are working to get that repealed. They've put together a petition campaign. They're doing very well on this, and there's a local news report we wanted to show you about these great teenagers in Alabama.
Hi, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Adam, and we are high school students from Birmingham, Alabama.
We are asking the Alabama legislature to remove a section of Alabama law that requires that sexual education teachers emphasize that homosexuality is not a lifestyle acceptable to the general public and that homosexual conduct is a criminal offense. We ask for this because we want our schools to be a safe place for everyone, and the current law promotes school-sponsored bullying.
Statistically, LGBT youth are disproportionately represented in juvenile justice systems, more likely to be homeless, and more likely to commit suicide. Alabama tends to be even worse than the national average.
I have a friend whose father refused to speak to him for months after he came out, even though they still lived in the same house. I have friends who've been disowned by family members, sent to conversion therapy, or kicked out of their homes.
And still, we're the lucky ones because we live in an urban area that has support systems like Bagsley and Gay Straight Alliance clubs and schools, which most of the state does not have these resources.
Please sign our petition. We want every student in the state of Alabama to walk into school knowing that this is a place where they can succeed.
We can't succeed if we don't believe in ourselves. This bill will allow teachers to be an ally to every student.
So kids in Alabama are standing up for themselves, gay teens.
Help them by going to change.org/Alabama teens.
And think of what any remaining excuse you might have not to do something would be if they're doing it.
Colorado Representative, the out gay Jared Polis, now the senior out gay member of the United States House of Representatives, says he will introduce a new Employment Non-Discrimination Act in April in the House, and he's rewriting it to make it stronger.
Although Tammy's been in Congress a lot longer.
Yes.
Yes. They think an NFL player is coming out of the closet.
That's a column on the CBS Sports website saying that there's someone who's contemplating it.
Yeah.
Well, he's got some support now. And our friend Army Lieutenant Dan Choi is going to trial this week for his 2010 White House fence protest of the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, which had a lot to do with forcing them to go ahead with that and repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
And Christine Quinn, who's the leading candidate for mayor in New York for the Democratic nomination, was riding high, but she got an article in the Times going over her record of distemper at times. And she's not backing down and saying, I do it to get things done, but it may be a bump in the road for her campaign. Or not. We'll see.
International news. 300,000 people showed up in Paris, France, to march against the proposed same-sex marriage legalization and legalization of adoption or in vitro fertilization for same-sex couples. They got in a real fight with the cops, who ended up tear gassing them and hitting them with nightsticks. But these were people who were brought in a lot by the Catholic Church, and a lot were unemployed youth who are upset about not having jobs, and they're sort of taking it out on the government in this way. So I don't know how much...
Holland was, walking through a district, and he was getting booed all the time. So it's, times are tough.
And then as they're clashing with the police, these right-wingers are yelling to each other, put the kids in front. And they're taking their tiny children and putting them in front where the cops are to be tear gassed and attacked with nightsticks.
Well,
but the National Assembly has already passed it,
right,
and the Senate is supposed to take it up on April 2nd.
Resistance is futile.
We hope.
In Britain, we told you last year about a 20-year-old who was set on fire and burned at his birthday party. 18 years old, significant burns, died from them. The kid who killed him has got a manslaughter charge, is getting 3.5 years.
Yeah. And a transsexual elementary school teacher in northwest England, Lucy Meadows, 32, is believed to have committed suicide. She was outed in a very hysterical, fear-mongering tabloid story in the Daily Mail.
Yes.
And then the Daily Mail reports the suicide using all male pronouns and names.
In Poland,
Shameless.
In Poland, we have that picture of the rainbow sculpture in Warsaw. This thing has been set on fire 4 times. Well, once was fireworks inadvertently, but they think at least 2 were arson. But people love the sculpture. They say it's not about gay stuff, it's about diversity and all that kind of stuff, and good to see it there in Warsaw.
In Nepal, a government official is going after the Blue Diamond Society, which is the long-standing LGBT rights and AIDS activist organization. They've done great work, and this official wants to de-sanction them, so people are fighting back against that.
Justin Welby was enthroned as the Archbishop of Canterbury this week, and just before that, Peter Tatchell, the gay activist, wrote a letter saying you're a homophobe, you're opposing our rights, and he said, look, can we just sit down and talk and not do this in the press? And so he's agreed to meet with him this week, and we'll see what comes out of that. I'm sure Peter will tell us.
We will. And we did hear that new Pope Francis had talked to gay activists in Buenos Aires, but, he's still not for us.
Is the Pope Catholic?
Yes, he is.
Well,
and in Canada, the House of Commons has passed a Gender Identity and Expression Non-Discrimination Act, including 4 cabinet ministers voted for it.
And speaking of religious things, I was at the premiere of the film about Jim McGreevey, and I've been pretty hard on him, but he's working with women who are in prison, mostly on drugs and things like that, and he works very well. So I recommend that. That's on HBO. But
This weekend.
Yes, at that hearing, besides Nancy Pelosi being there,
The screening.
at the screening, the former president of Georgetown University, a Jesuit priest named Leo O'Donovan, the reason I thought of it, he said, I'm kind of glad the Pope is Catholic. And then he said, oh, Jesuit. But he said, I want to apologize for the way the Catholic Church has treated gay people. That's a step.
Okay.
AIDS news?
Yes. Boston College, which is a private Catholic university, has told its students that they have to stop their program of handing out free condoms and safe sex information because it violates Catholic policy. The ACLU has pointed out that although it is a private university, it gets, like federal funds for scholarships and stuff, and that this is an improper infringement of free speech, and there may be a lawsuit going on there.
I'm just teasing, but I don't have meningitis that I know of. The New York Times has finally discovered that there are lethal strains out there affecting a lot of gay men. They wrote a terrible story about it, a very misleading story, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't look into the vaccine for yourself if you are sexually active.
The Health and Human Services Secretary Sebelius declared LGBT Health Awareness Week and promised more action on health disparities for gay people. The Senate committee passed the HIV Organ Policy Equity Bill, which would repeal the ban on studying organ transplants between people who are HIV positive. All of them. And the nearly naked student AIDS activists held a spring break beach party in the office of Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid they wore bikinis and wrote AIDS activist slogans on their bodies.
Entertainment news,
Yes.
the not revival, but the new version of Breakfast at Tiffany's, supposedly based on the source material by Capote, not the movie, was absolutely unbearable, even though it has some fine performers on it who are just not doing a good job. It's awful.
Jenna Wolfe, we're not going to run this tape, but maybe we could put up the picture of Jenna Wolfe and Stephanie Gosk.
There they
Jenna
are.
seated, pregnant with a baby girl. Her girlfriend is Stephanie Gosk. They both are correspondents for NBC. Jenna went on the Today Show to talk about this. They supposedly will get married. Their stories in People magazine. Congratulations,
Maybe
Jenna
we'll
and
run
Stephanie.
that next week. Amy Pascal of Sony.
You can see the tape of the Today Show
Sure.
on the MSNBC website.
Amy Pascal of Sony Pictures said, how about the next time when any of us are reading a script and it says a word like fag, take a pencil and just cross it out. She says, we've got to do more to get this stuff out of our movies.
I thought that was great.
And I like the movie My Brother, the Devil, which is about sort of Arab English boys in the East End, a gangster movie with a gay sub-theme. Terrific if it happens to come your way.
Remember that we are now putting this show up as a video podcast as well as audio on our website, gayusatv.org. Go there and you can get either version.
Oh, and the Supreme Court, they'll probably rule by the end of June.
Yeah. Don't hold your breath. But next
Maybe
week,
sooner.
Next week, Gay USA.
Bye.
Bye.